your patience. Legislative inquiry hearing 3, Thursday, October 30th, 2025, 10 a.m. Held at Howard Pike Complex, Redwood Hall. Legislative Chambers, 100 Kiowa Way, Carnegie, Oklahoma, 73015. Agenda, call to order. Call to order at 10:21 a.m. And invocation, and we have an invocation. Legislator Wisdom.
Det var en dag, en gång. Det är en dag, det är en gång. Han så går. Dag sen går och idag. Dag sen pedo aun tama dag sen donge jag be. Dag it en hag idag. Ett ham det kita på ett dag sen då. Nå sägjai. Betado de dag i. Ett ham dag i no. Det kan ett pain. Det dag. Ett ham. Go guba dog. Thankful for this day here where all Kiowas would come together in a good way. I offer a prayer, Heavenly Father, that you touch our hearts, our minds, give us good health, heal what needs to be healed when things are said, Heavenly Father. We're just trying to do the best we can to get everything out there in the open and learn what needs to be done so we can fix it. This is not an easy task, Lord. And I ask that you bless our Kiowa chairman, vice chairman, all of our leadership, all of our directors, elected leaders, employees, Father God. We ask that you watch over all our Kiowa families. Take care of them. Take care of them days to come, Heavenly Father. It's coming up on Christmas season. There's a lot of people that are in need with this government shutdown, Heavenly Father. And it's at the forefront of our minds to take care of those people who need help with their bills, just help with food, Heavenly Father. It's not something easy. It's not something we should have to think about, but it is. That's where we're at today, Father. Our people are calm. So all we can do is pray that you watch over all of our Kiowa people, wherever they may be. My nephew, Heavenly Father, I want you to bless him today, Father God. I'm looking upon him and I'm thinking about, how we can heal things together, Lord. Father God, I just want you to look upon all our Kiowa people, wherever they may be. You watch over them, Father. Take care of our Kiowa families and just bless our meeting today. Make our words true and help us to work together. Lord, we're just trying to find a way forward. And all we can do is ask for these things. And we pray to you in thy son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen. I hope.
Roll call.
Kyle Tattletty,
Present.
Michael Primus,
Here.
Timothy Saypoodle,
Here.
Cole DeLon,
Present.
Taya Rosario,
Here.
Ben Wolf,
Oh,
Warren Weathon.
all.
7 present, quorum established.
Next, we have approval of the agenda. On the agenda, we have inquiry hearing, William Weaver, CFO Treasurer, Marlon Torres, Executive Director of Private Operations.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. He said. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Agenda is approved. Item 1, inquiry hearing. We have the swearing for
William Weaver.
William Weaver, followed by Martin Wortham.
You want them sworn in at the same time? Okay. Let's do Williams first.
Stand up.
I don't know. What you going? So repeat after me. I swear under penalty of perjury that all testimony I provide today shall be the truth, the whole truth, and I shall not mislead or intentionally omit any material fact in response to any question I am asked. I swear under penalty of perjury
I swear under penalty of perjury
that all testimony I provide today
that all testimony I provide today
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole
the
truth,
whole truth,
and I shall not mislead
and I shall not mislead
or intentionally omit
or intentionally omit
any material fact
any material fact
in response to any question I am asked.
in response to any question I am asked.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Okay, I'm just gonna open up. Welcome, Mr. Weaver. Welcome to court, please. There's section, yes, Mr. Weaver, you have the opportunity to make an opening statement up to 5 minutes. You'd like to. You don't have to, you don't. Prefer not to. Mr. Tory, the same opportunity.
Don't really have much more than just a statement. The other government, we all confirm, we have to know, we all confirm to be a good steward of the tribe and to look at operations and manage things according to my profession and all the skills and abilities. And I'll be that done now. So, appreciate the time. Thank you.
Some quick one of it is, yes, I can just tell that's not gonna, yeah, it didn't pick up. I thank you for your opening statement
Mhm.
and we don't have to repeat it. This is more of a technical component. I know that that's not gonna get picked up on the audio. So I think we need to probably get everyone a microphone potentially.
I think we could turn the microphone on too.
Oh.
So it was on. You guys want to turn that mic on? There you go.
Mr. Weaver, point your mic kind of down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, because there's speakers in the ceiling and it feeds back.
Thank you, gentlemen, and to start off with. I'd like to. Speak about the charter of the KCOA board. And if you can. Go with section 18. It's under article 11 from the binders. Everything, are you using? Shoot it out on the board. So.
I don't think we need the KCOA charter from.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna need a copy.
We need the whole.
See what you guys. Yeah.
Speaker phone.
Oh, well, that way, Mike, do you want me to take that one?
I'm wondering if they're missing theirs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you are. You're gonna be first, and then that's what I want to provide.
Yeah, I believe it's open to section 18. we'll be taking a look at Article 11, Mr. Weaver. Speaking about the ACOA. I understand that there was 3.7 million to be transferred. The Snow account, the tribal account, do you know if that has occurred?
Even if it hasn't occurred in the initial, that was requested. It's as they should for, but it's an additional discussion, they should be deep on it, so.
Thank you.
That was very, very hard to hear.
So this is a technical component, like, I don't know what the best way to approach this, but.
I think our mics have to be off up here. We'll get feedback.
And then Marlon's will have to be off until he's, there you go.
Now try it.
Testing.
Yeah, I can hear it. Better, a little bit better. If you can help, pull close to you.
Okay, so I'll just repeat that, the 3.7 million has not been, the 3.7 million has not been transferred yet.
No, the first 16, but goal million has been, the second request, the second, I think that was same discussion, but it's not the same.
Thank you. And taking a look at Article 11. The question is, are you following this charter which has been amended? Since July. And when I say, are you following the charter, I'm specifically talking about the 5% fund for investment for Indian-owned businesses.
Which section you do reference into specifically.
Section 11.11. Just making sure that you are familiar with this section here.
This came to my attention about a month or two ago, but I'm not even aware of that. That is going to be.
Okay. So there is that section that states. Each month, 5% of the net revenues placed in investment account shall be into a separate account, which shall be invested with the concurrence of the legislature in businesses owned by Indians that provide a direct benefit to Indian country. And I know that it's fairly new, but when everything gets going and the revenue is being turned over to the tribe, will you be following this? Or
Yes, that is correct. We discussed that. We set the trustee account, then we set the additional account. To establish that and put that in place. We did not set up an additional account in reference to trading with some question.
And then just moving on to section 11.12. It states 1% of the total fund balance in the investment account shall be allocated in the annual budget to be donated each year to a charitable cause selected by the president with the concurrence of the legislature with aids in the country. Just pointing that out. The next question is about the 120-day reserve. My question is, can you hold the money that's in the 120-day reserve on the tribal side rather than ACOA side? And whenever there's like a capital expense, then send the money from the tribe to the cinema.
Yes, speaking, we can do that, we discussed that, I mean, as you know, we created the account and we try to go as a fiduciary for that trust. And on execution or establishment of the pill process, you don't feel that that's how that.
Thank you. And I'll come back with some more questions. At this time, is there another legislator?
Good morning, Mr. Weaver. My question revolves around the sponsorship law and fund that was in our budget. How much was allocated in our budget for the sponsorship line item under the chairman's office?
I don't remember right offhand. I just said, I remember there wasn't an amount that was set there. I remember there was some discussion in the budget process, that the legislature wanted to cap that, but also had it engineered to cap the amount and identify the entities that were gonna receive that amount, but I don't remember right offhand what the amount was.
You have the budget taken from 2024 and the proposed from 2025?
Dude, give me 1 second, I'll pull them right up.
And then I'd like to also pull up the sponsorship list that we saw yesterday. I think forget the number. I'll find it here in a minute though.
You wanted 2024?
Yeah, just 2020, the last proposed budget that we went back to, reverted back to, because we don't have a current budget, a new budget for this year.
I think it's there's a first budget modification, is that the one?
Correct.
Can you see it?
Yeah, can we go down to the actual line on this for the chairman's budget? Keep going, Jason.
That's right. Scanning for it as I'm going along.
Should be under executive branch.
Yeah, it's up here, isn't it?
Should be below that.
Oh, we'll keep on going down, Jason.
Yeah, under the other categories.
Oh, other categories, the other tab,
Other,
yes.
I bet you William knows where it is,
Go
but
back up to that and it should be under the other category listed. That, but
you're right here.
not that one, the next back up to the previous.
I didn't see it on that.
So let's go back to other. And you slow down a little bit, somewhere down these. Okay, so it would be.
So William, it's under tab 57 in the booklet in front of you. You might be the one able to get us there quickest.
Fine. Okay, if you go back up to the executive branch one, and then the category over the left, it just says, next one, right here.
It's not under there, it'd be under other, remember it was attached to like the supplement.
Okay, so you have to go back to the front because there's another category, you have to go all the way down to other, there's another budget, that's other.
Yes, the budget was called other. Keep on going down,
I'm sorry.
the long documents.
Keep on going past all this, right?
Okay.
It's under tab 57 in front of you, William, if you help us out.
There we go. You just had it. You just had it. Go down,
Down?
right there. You just had it. Right there. You see it says community assistance sponsorships,
Hey,
$100,000. So that's what was approved in our budget. So now let's pull up the list of sponsorships and expenditures for 2024 and 2025. Do you concede that was what the last proof of budget said?
Yes, unless it's a modification.
I'm not aware of a modification on that budget, like for that line item.
Warren, do you remember which number we're looking at?
I have to go back. It was the list of sponsorships. It was on the top of the page, on the fourth page of your documents.
Yeah, I'm getting it. I believe it's 25. Yeah, it's 25.
So under 25, we're gonna put it up here now. So my question is, does these expenditures cover 24 and 25?
Yes, because if you look at the data, 31-23, that was June 30-24, which is one fiscal year. July 1-21, 24, so it's June 30-25 was a separate fiscal year.
Okay, so it's not just 24, it's, looks like it's spanning about 3 years,
That is
right?
correct, yes.
So we're not spending $300 in 1 year, right? $300,000 in 1 year. But my question is, these expenditures, are you aware with the sponsorship law?
I'm familiar with it.
Set aside for traditional societies, set aside for cultural organizations and churches. The threshold was 10,000 for traditional societies, and we listed them. We're gonna actually, we can scroll down, we can, oh, he's gonna pull up there. There we go, traditional societies, and then you go down $5,000 for all of the Kiowa churches that were chartered by Kiowas. And then below that was other cultural organizations and tribal events. So my question is, was there any dialogue on, go back to the sponsorship list. Any dialogue on the sponsorship regarding the Ironman competition, which is the 5th one down, 2,500 sponsorship for David Anderson?
Legislature, when you say dialogue,
How did that, how is that a cultural organization, traditional society, or Kiowa church?
I'm not aware of how that's cultural. I can't speak to that, but I can speak that sometimes monies come into the fund that are purposely dedicated for that are not actual travel shares given as a donation, and then they were expended that way through. That's the way you can account for it.
Would that show up on this list? This is just expenditures, wouldn't it show up as a credit?
Well, that's only showing expenses. You don't have a revenue there. If you requested a revenue, we can show you all the things that have been transferred in, brought in as donations. That's, yeah.
Okay. My concern here is that we are setting aside sponsorship dollars for Kiowa societies, cultural organizations, and churches. And then this fund is being used as a sponsorship fund for individual citizens that don't qualify for this law. And so would you agree, like the law is pretty clear on what that money is supposed to be allocated to?
Yes, speaking, as I said, I would agree that that's the purpose of, but what we do in the finance and accounting is to make sure that it all flows through. There's a full accountability of, in the absence of that not being put in where you have not seen it extended here. So as a default, we make sure that everything's accounted for, even donations or collections or whatever the case may be, and we list them in there so that every expenditure is fully accounted for. Now, we can go back and look research wise, or you can make a request wise to have additional information on that, and then we can go back and research additionally and tell you where the funds came from, what the source was, and so on and so forth.
Who's the approving authority for the expenditure of these funds?
Every expenditure has a workflow. There's a requester, there's a department head, then there's like the position, director, the executive director, or whatever person is in that role for that. So we go through all those steps and then it comes up, it's a financial review for accountability and it's processed through. So
So
there is a workflow behind every transaction.
would you mind just telling us who's in that workflow?
I don't have that right in front of me. That's built into the system, and sometime, legislature, it can change.
Okay,
If someone's not there, it has a default, it was 1, 2, 3, 4. If number 2 is not available to get inside, then there'd be an alternate to number 2, and alternate to number 3. But I don't have that right in front of me.
so we as a legislature, we made the law, we wanna make sure it's clear, because part of our job is to have oversight over where these sponsorships are going. You know, that we're being fair, because it was intended to help our societies, churches, and cultural organizations. Now, I know that's a little broad, but to me, I think I don't wanna write a law that's gonna like limit us so much, but at the same time, I think we're using this as kind of a fund for anybody and everybody to go to the chairman and say, hey, I wanna, cause I don't know what the other one, if you look down below. There's $250 sponsorship for Tasha Clark and then nothing else there. You know, what was that for? I don't know, I don't have any accountability, or what are we using this fund for? So that's my question here, and I think we need to be cognizant of what this law and how this fund is being utilized.
Let's say, so legislator, as you're aware, when I came on board, I worked with the legislator. We made every bit of information available to you in every way. As a CFO and as a treasurer, confirming to you today, that information is available to you at a simple request.
Okay.
You can request it from the chairman and then we'll provide it to you, so he's aware of what you're receiving. But our office is open book. We have our phone number, we have our email, anything you requested from us, you receive. You'd be remiss not to give you what you requested, we have nothing behind it, and it's open book. But you remember, there's thousands and thousands of phone, thousands of transactions. And the detail that we're looking at here doesn't show that. But at any point in time, any day you want something specifically, you can make that request and we can provide it to you.
Okay, thank you. That was my question on sponsorship. In terms of Kiowa Incorporated, my next question is going to be focused on, we still have no funding source for Kiowa Incorporated at this time, right?
So there's not the funding source, but there is one account that was created because the Iowa tribe is authorized to have a loan fund that was monies directly sent from the treasury.
Okay.
The discussions, passing the moratorium accounts,
Okay,
discussed that with me. I was given approval to go ahead and open that account just so the funds were sent directly from the treasury. So that one account.
Sorry to interrupt, speaker, just it's very difficult to hear Mr. Weaver, he's very soft spoken, and maybe if he could speak closer to the mic.
okay,
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, so one fund was created, which is a treasury fund to the Kiowa Tribe Loan Fund. So that one is created in enterprise, but the control of it is under the government.
so it would it be true to say that there will be many sources when Kiowa Inc. is up and running from different areas, grants, funding agencies? There's gonna be a lot of different pots of money coming into the incorporation.
That is correct, but we have worked with the treasury institution, we have a full accountability of all of that. We developed in the treasury perspective to have what's called an online exchange with the institution. They have separated out by federal regulation numbers or IRS numbers, what the activity would be accounted for. The consumer bills may turn into profit, that's taxation of the government does, but there will always be a full accountability. And as in the past, you've asked for account balances and information, that information will be requested at any point in time, and that can be shared.
Okay. Can't The Dropbox folder you sent me, Jason, I can't pull it up this morning, so I'm gonna have to just.
What do you need?
I need the memo from the chairman in regards to Theodore Nunzio.
I get it.
Can you provide us any details on loan payments or business dealings between Theodore Nunzio and the Kiowa tribe?
I am not aware of any loan institution or digital activities since I've been here with Mr. Nunzio.
Yeah.
Any agreements to my knowledge that I'm aware of.
We have a memo that we're gonna pull up here and put on the.
You guys got my copy, so.
Okay. We're gonna put it there, just so you're aware.
But you should have my copy.
Were you, when did you begin your employment with the Kiowa tribe?
December 18th, 2024.
2023. So this was a little bit before. So really, you really don't know anything about any payments to Native Brands of Oklahoma. It was a cash outlay of $50,000 to be paid to Theodore Nunzio in monthly installments of $10,000 over a 5-month period. Did you have any knowledge of this when you came on board?
Let's say I was not aware of that. We can go back and pull historical activity and see if there were payments made before I arrived.
Mhm.
Like I said, if you have any specifics and details, we can go back and do some research for historically.
And are you aware of any ongoing disputes or have there been any communication in regards to Nunzio's involvement with the tribe?
Not.
Speaker, that's really the bulk of my questions for Mr. Weaver at this time.
Thank you, legislator. Are there any other legislators ready to ask? Excuse me.
Speaker, I'm in motion for 10-minute recess.
Okay, second. We have a motion and a second for a 10-minute recess. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? We thought. And a second by Legislator Rosario. You return to session. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? We are back in session. I'll turn it over to the legislative.
So just to follow up, Mr. Weaver, we were talking on the topic of Theodore Nunzio. So you came in after, I think all those, the last payment. Can we pull up that expenditure report for the checks? You said you began in November 2023?
December 18th.
December 18th, 2023. So I know that most of those payments were made to him, I think the last one being in October of that year. So you're not aware of any of the, I mean, you did have to close out the accounts, right, at the end of the year?
Yes, legislature, we close the accounts out, but we don't go back and specifically look at every transaction.
Okay.
What we do is we get with the auditor and they come in and do a performance of all the information. And when they go through and randomize certain transactions and validate, if they have any questions and close out any can reconcile anything with that, they bring it to our attention.
Okay.
We'll follow up with them in detail.
So nothing was brought up as far as like accounting for these 5 payments to Theodore Nunzio. I believe the dates are up there on the screen. $10,000. There was 5 payments, the last one happening October 30th, 2023, prior to you coming on board, so. You had no knowledge of how this all happened and occurred, right?
No, legislator, and typically, as I stated, when you see any transaction made, if you would inquire about that, there should always be backup documentation, W-9 contract, some memorandum of understanding or agreement, or something that was put in place that then goes to finance and they're directed to pay upon such. And so that's what they were.
Prior to you being the CFO, Did you see, I guess you talked about W-9 contract, was there a lot of payments being made at that time without that documentation?
At the tribe,
Yes,
not from that perspective, because typically before a payment is made, they're always required to be a vendor. When I got there and identified it, there was a couple of things, of course, you may remember that one time where
sure,
CFO said, hey, we need W-9 for certain things.
correct. I
There
do
are
remember that.
certain items on the IRS complication that falls on what's called tribal exclusion. And then those things where I can find out that they don't require, but all other things that didn't fall under that, that's where I made the request and it immediately came to my attention. That there were some things that we didn't have that we made requests, get them for everything. That was your point.
But that was part of the subpoena of this, for these hearings, was to, we wanted information on these payments. And so it sounds like all this was done prior to you coming on board, but there was no digging into what happened, where were these payments go, what were they used for? All we know was for Native Brands. And yesterday, the chairman said he was starting up a business, so we're just looking for more details.
Yes, legislator, and what happens sometimes when the audit closes out, once the audit is closed, that seals the books and that certifies and validates that the books are good within something and there's no concerns. So we kind of go on from that period. Like I said, this was after I got here, we were actually in the field of audit that closed out the year of the previous year, and we did that, and we worked on that following year. So nothing, I didn't go back and look and pull up information and research, but I'm pretty sure there would be some data to support the transactions.
Okay. My next line of questioning is in regards, I would like to know, you were a key role player in when we were determining the budget. And then we addressed, you had addressed with us that there were some salaries that you felt needed to be looked at, and the chairman had said that he would like to increase salaries to bring them to be more equitable with those roles within our area. Can you tell us what that process was and how you determine salaries for key roles like chairman, treasurer, CFO, and attorney general? So the proposed budget.
So legislature, when we were working on that budget, the chairman.
Can you pull the microphone just a little bit?
When we were working on that budget, chairman actually identified some areas that he was having challenges in finding quality people to fill. And then the discussion came up that he had requested previously before I arrived here about 2 years before that. He asked for a wage analysis to be done. And I think that bounced around for 3 years and wasn't done. Coming in, what we did was go online to like salary.com, other ones out Glassdoor, things like that. We pulled up some salary comparisons, demographically of what the salary ranges were. And then based on that, the chairman went back and identified some things in areas that he wanted to not bring people fully up to that, try to start working up towards Mark, because he realized that there was a big disparity in what people were being compensated and what the market. There were some positions that were open for such a long time that they were even unfilled. Following up on that, I shared with you information that we had contracted with somebody that come to do wage analysis, and that has since come in. And I think that has that support what people are more exiting compensated. We have a market indicated that would be, and what the actual percentage of disparities was that exists, and how there's a plan in place to try to move forward and maybe future bring them up to more.
So you are currently wearing 2 hats, are you not?
That's correct.
Which hats are you wearing right now?
The treasurer and the CFO.
So you're the treasurer and the CFO for the tribe. So I know that when you came on board, that was the chairman's plan, was to have you doing both of those hats. And what did that process, how did you have to get confirmed to do that? Do you remember?
No, chairman brought me on as a CFO, and then when the request asked if I would be interested in being the treasurer, I sent a request to him. He asked me that I sent back with information for the legislature, and I believe the legislature reviewed that, had a hearing and spoke with me, and then after that, they confirmed me to be the treasurer.
So you were confirmed by the legislative body to do both of those hats.
That's what I remember.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to be clear on that, because it's part of like the budgeting process. Hopefully, moving forward, Mr. Wood, and I want to thank you for coming here and appearing before. I didn't say that earlier. I should have said that at the beginning, but thank you for appearing before this hearing. I think we need to. Hopefully, once we get beyond these hearings, we can go back to the budget. Because we gotta do a modification. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed, and we want to work with you on getting that going again, because it's been kind of halted. So I just want to say thank you for appearing for this hearing and you listening to my questions. Thank you for your responses.
They can't hear you. Okay, Scott, message.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Probably have to put it on your book.
Okay. Thank you, legislator. Now, are there any questions?
Yeah, I can jump into some questions, Speaker.
Turn it over to legislators alone.
Okay, thank you so much, Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Weaver, for being with us this morning. In terms of kind of just setting the table, I think we sort of got into questions that were substantive pretty quickly. But just for the benefit of kind of the folks listening online, we just established that we were both the treasurer and the chief financial officer for the tribe. And both of those roles, I believe the chief financial officer role kind of started first, and then you were confirmed later as treasurer by the legislature, at least before I was on board. I don't recall the timeline of that. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr.
Okay, and then in terms of your background, I don't expect sort of a deconstruction of your CV or anything, but how many years of financial expertise, because you obviously have considerable, but just for the benefit of kind of establishing for the record, how many decades or years would you say you have expertise and experience in your domain?
30+ years.
Okay. And in terms of, obviously you're kind of very fluent with protocol, Jason, if we could get up that 32A document, please. So Mr. Wheaton, was kind of referencing us earlier with respect to the Nuncio expenditures, and that happened well before you were on board. I believe that this document actually is signed by Lawrence, and it effectively kind of agrees to or stipulates that there will be a cash outlay in installments of 5 installments totaling $10,000 each, with a sum of $50,000 kind of given to Mr. Nuncio and Native Brands of Oklahoma LLC. Now, I'm not going to ask you about kind of the specific complexities of that, because as we established with Legislator Wheaton's questions and your responses earlier, this kind of whole process was executed before you came on board in December of 2023. I believe the last payment was stipulated as the end of October of that year. But you kind of mentioned that with respect to what is standard operating practice is that there would be attendant or associated with kind of an outlay of this nature and of this kind of substantial amount, that there would be a memorandum of understanding, or that there would be some sort of kind of other documentation laying out the terms. Is that standard protocol typically when an entity makes out an outlay of that kind of nature?
That's typical.
Okay, so yesterday, the chairman kind of noted that this was the sort of totality of the documentation. There's nothing that establishes terms of repayment or terms of ownership or what the tribe itself effectively gets in exchange for what Mr. Spotted is terming an investment. And so typically though, whenever an organization makes an investment into a business venture, there are usually some sort of terms of repayment or kind of stipulation, like in exchange for this initial investment, the kind of investor or investing entity will be, have a 5% ownership stake or a 10% ownership stake. There's usually some sort of kind of outline when both parties are understanding and committed to have kind of the documentation for that type of interaction or exchange of monetary votes. Is that correct? Is that typical standard practice in your experience?
Legislature depends on what the nature of the agreement is, if for services, goods, or quantitative information.
Okay,
It just depends on the nature of that. That would relate to what's called KPI, key performance indicators. That would be measurables, would be the outcome of the agreement. So depending on the nature of the agreement, those would be things that would be included in what's called scope of work, statement of work, or the expectations of the agreement.
okay, but typically there are specifics in kind of the expectations of the agreement that are kind of outlined and delineated. Is that standard practice in your experience?
There should be conveyed some expectations.
Okay. So I'm just establishing that as a baseline, kind of based upon your wellspring of expertise and kind of your background, which is very deep. With over 3 decades, I believe, of kind of experience in the financial field, that there are expectations typically kind of delineated in some way or some form, formally committed or memorialized for the understanding of both parties. That did not happen here. And of course, you have no connection to that not happening here because this happened prior to your tenure, but I'm just establishing what is sort of the standard practice or what is generally the common practice among financial executions and financial agreements of that nature. Okay, the next question that I have.
Legislature, I'd like to speak to that just a little bit. On the other side of the world, there is an expectation. But that's not the role we operate in. We operate in Indian country. Therefore, there is needs and processes and protocols and an environment that requires deviation from those things to get things done. That being said, I've seen contracts in the indigenous world that probably wouldn't pass on the other side. 25% upfront, 50% upfront, initial payment to start. There's things in the indigenous world we have to suffice and operate under to get things done. And company board, I recognize that and we continue to strengthen it. So I say that I'm finished to say that yes, there are things that we done in the course of GAP and protocol and best practices. Some of those things when you come to speaking, something to give a preference. We're just being worked on.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are elements like in statute, obviously, there's a lot of tribes have Indian preference or indigenous preference or tribal membership preference kind of protocols delineated. That seems to be distinct from, especially kind of in the scope of this particular interaction that we have documented. You're talking about getting things done. So how would a outlay that the tribe controls effectively, you're talking about getting things done, and so within the scope of this particular kind of interaction, I mean, it's the chairman is the one controlling whether or not an outlay in this instance is issued and whether or not there are expectations delineated. So a little bit, are you saying that this is an instance where in order to get things done, does protocols need to be relaxed, or what is the caution?
Well, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm simply saying is what you referred to as typical in the best practices of the world. I said that that's not always the case in Indian country. What is typical in Indian country, you pay something up front, give an initial payment to start a process or to engage in that. On the other side, best practices indicate net pay at 30 days or 45 days or 60 days. It simply means you get the goods and services up front, they're verified it's received, and then payment is made. That is not typical in any country that it typically works that way. It's typical that there's some type of agreement that payment is done in a different perspective, or as you see there, you may see some contracts that would say 10% up front, half up front, and then payments thereafter. That's
Right, but is it typical in Indian country for cash outlays to be made front without any sort of delineation of the return on that investment.
No, there has to be some expectations.
Okay. Right, because we established, yes,
Process, yes.
right, we established yesterday that effectively a $50,000 cash outlay was made with no sort of expectation or no return on investment delineated. And the chairman has established that the business year is not operational 2 years after the execution of that contract. Would that be typical in Indian country? Where tens of thousands of dollars are just dispersed and there's no kind of like percentage of ownership or anything delineated in
So,
the initial agreement.
as I briefly read that, it implies that there's going to be an investment in an anticipated business to start up. In the business world, that's typically a risk, and sometimes you take that risk, the greater return rewards from the greater risk. And from what I read there, on the bottom it says, should it materialize, taking more time to materialize, which implies there was an expectation, something to come out of that as a result of that agreement.
Right, so, there's but it is not standard operating practice to just have a 50K or however much money with no sort of like 5%, this is what is delineated. That would be common at this stage, correct, where there is an agreement of the ownership that is accessed or procured by that investment.
Let's just say you would expect more, but the consummation of some things that happen in any country is often accepted. Sometimes things are often accepted and then materialize formally later on. But that's why you haven't from us, that you may expect to see more, there could be more if you're requesting more. I don't know, I just see what you have in front of us.
Right, because this is the only kind of documentation for that particular expenditure which is why that's what you see in front of you, and that's it.
I can get back to the office, request the ladies to look and see if there's additional information to follow that in.
Okay, does this kind of outlay where it's $50,000 to directly to the business? And there are no sort of kind of, at least to me, this would not constitute a sort of memorandum of understanding because there's no terms for prepayment, there's no terms for the percentage ownership, kind of access. So kind of like in the scope of the tribe's policies. Now, does something of that nature where there's just $50,000 cash outlay, and the chairman says, I imagine that they've been living off of it, is that consistent with the tribe's policies?
I came in December 2023. I cannot speak what occurred before I arrived, but today I arrived, no.
Okay, so this would not be consistent with the tribe policies today. Okay. In terms of this memo, you can read it because again, it's the only documentation that we have right now, from this particular thing. Given this as the sole sort of documentation that was, let's just say, hypothetically, like today, this came to you, would you process this payment? Or would you ask for more documentation?
Well, I would have sat down with the chairman and we would have gone through that and redefined it to make it palpable.
Okay,
That being said, that line in there states should loan revenues take more time to materialize, implying that they were going to pay them off of the revenues.
so you would, however, not process this payment, but you would, in your best practices, confer with the chairman, stipulate what adjustment needs to be made, and then once it was modified, you were kind of after that one process, is that right?
If it was clear definition of what the expectations are and what's going to be provided, that's correct.
Okay. In terms of, you mentioned kind of like earlier, that sometimes there needs to be, and I'm not going to try to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was like, you mentioned that sometimes in Indian country, best operating practices in the kind of other side of the world, as you mentioned, have to be modified in order to get things done. What kind of, policies need to be modified typically on this side in order to get things
As
done?
I said, I don't think I mentioned modified, mentioned that there's a deviation from what's expected. As
Okay.
best practices to how it's needed. And that deviation typically means that this is how we be typically done, which you can typically expect to see. But in any country, this is how we do it.
So taking a look at kind of the loan revenue materialization symptoms that you cited as sort of like focused on just a moment ago, says, should loan revenue take more time to materialize, we will extend this payment schedule for an additional 5-month period until such time that loan revenue have closed and are available for the manufacturing project to begin operations. Would that be an agreement to effectively pay, an additional $50,000? Because it's saying we're going to extend the schedule of payments where it's $10,000 each month for 5 months. That's saying we will, in this particular circumstance, agree to extending the payment schedule for an additional 5-month period. At least to me, one reasonable interpretation of that would be that the kind of provisions are suggesting that there might be an additional allocation over the course of 5 months. Is that a reasonable reading of that?
If I was to see that legislation, I would say that's contingency, implying that, as we discussed earlier, if there are some contracts in any country where you pay up front, and that's what it appears to be to me, that there was an agreement to pay up front, it would be at this protocol over this period of time. And if at this period of time, the loan revenues took more time to materialize, there would be additional assistance to them. But the ultimate expectation was that revenues would be materializing at the end of this process.
So consistent with best practices, like you mentioned on the other side of the world, is there anything in the context of best practices within this letter that would constitute or be citable in sort of typical financial agreements that would constitute the sort of repayment of the loan?
Again, as I stated, best practices would indicate one thing, but deviations bring something else. Best practices on the other side, this wouldn't exist. There would be no upfront payment, there would be no advancement, there would be goods, services received. Net pay at 30 days, net pay at 60 days, net pay at 90 days.
Okay,
That's the way the government works. Our government deviates, and that's what you have in front of you, a deviation of the typical best practices.
I guess, in here, within the scope of the letter, like, is there anything that reads to you as what the tribe gets for this outline?
Legislature, I wish I could speak to that. I can't read the letter and see what it implies, but I don't know the full extent of the discussion. I don't know the full extent of what was promised and what was offered, except I just see.
Right,
this
but
from that.
But in the letter, I can't see anything that the tribe gets. Do you see anything in the letter, just within the scope of the letter?
Well,
Not
okay.
expecting the, okay.
Right, I think if you look that backwards, it says, should revenues take more time, implying that there is an expectation that what is going to be done when we constantly disagreement will give income or revenues or money to the tribe. And it's simply saying there, and should it take more time to materialize, additional assistance would be provided, is the way I would read that. So I would read that line, and that line to me would be indicative of there is some expectation of what this initial payment and agreement exists for. It doesn't delineate it out in there. But that line would imply to me there was an expectation that something should be returned to the tribe on behalf of this.
Okay, so. I guess just to talk about sort of an analog. You mentioned that there are deviations from kind of best operating procedures in the other half of the world and the country, and those are typical. So would kind of the instance where the tribe ultimately paid out, I believe, 8 or 9 million for the Hobart Casino with no kind of provisions or no sort of contractual delineation about what it would get, that would be a deviation, obviously, considerably from best practices. Does that constitute a deviation?
I would agree.
Okay. Are you bonded as the treasurer?
I believe I'm bonded under the insurance we have, but there's no additional separate bond.
Okay. Kind of just taking a sort of we won't dive too deep into the rabbit hole probably, but you know, I think just citing that kind of Hobart Casino construction project. I'll stipulate that we did not ask for documentation, I mean, on that particular environment specifically, but with respect to that, I know that there were expenditures made where there was no sort of, you know, schedule of construction sort of stipulated before those expenditures were made, but in kind of agreement for construction by a casino or by a tribe, there would typically be an expectation or a schedule of at least a schedule before values were made for construction project. Schedule typically is correct. Okay. When we're talking about deviations,
Scared to get in.
I guess ultimately who is responsible for those deviations.
Change your name, please.
You have to be specific to us in reference to what deviation you're speaking.
Okay.
So there's different levels, and you're doing agreement, and you're doing discussion, and you're doing being put in place, it just depends on the level of agreement that you're referring to.
Okay, so like this being a deviation, the chairman executed this agreement, so the chairman would be responsible for that deviation. Fair assessment.
The chairman will be responsible for.
Okay. And in terms of,
Hacking Zoom meetings.
you know, something like the overpayment in Hobart, where kind of money was expended prior to
This one's a
the completion of that construction. Whoever transmitted the money in that instance would be responsible for the deviation. Is that correct? Is that a fair assessment?
Not the person that transmitted the money, because the money would not be transmitted without a request or some form of approval. Finance will not just send money out unless it was requested or kind of like in that memo you have there, this is what they want to receive. And then as they may disperse, say with detail, what their dispersion was made.
Okay, well, at least that's kind of like in best practices, you would have received a request or an approval, and that would be is that correct?
In best practices, that would be the expectation.
Okay. Got some questions, moving on. And so I believe there was kind of a request for confidentiality from the executive branch on this particular scope. And so we're gonna put up a document that is not requested to be confidential. And I just want to stipulate that my questions are gonna be very broad, where we don't address specifics. So it's more just about format and general kind of structure. And so I'm not going to be asking about specifics related to any sort of particular kind of transaction or anything here. So don't feel that my questions are oriented around any particular person or any particular kind of instance, because I'm stipulating that I'm not going to dive into what was asked or what's confidential from the executive branch and adopted information. So this is kind of the big loan program. And it sort of delineates here, which is the standard cover sheet, with kind of the minimum terms and conditions. And to the best of my understanding, the provisions are sort of taken directly from the Labor and Employment Act. Is that their assessment?
That was established before I got here, but I believe it refers to, the resolution, and so it's designed and built to flow in accordance with that.
Okay, with respect to kind of executing, payday loans, obviously, those are approved by the record that they've approved, and then the finance department, sort of executes whatever is approved. Is that the standard operating procedure?
So there has to be a collaboration, but there's moving parts of that, there's a calculation that has to occur. There's an need that has to be identified, we're gonna have to go to their director, need to, there's open to need to HR to determine what they're eligible for at that point in time. But remember that payday loans, predicated on things that.
Yeah, like it's a percentage of
Correct,
your paycheck or whatever.
correct.
And so are you typically part of the, or you typically sort of utilize, I guess, by other, those sort of folks in that process to say, hey, can you calculate this for us, or could you provide us with this sort of calculation, or are you sort of separate from that process?
As I said, to finance, first of all, that when it comes to pay. The calculation and the validation of the information happens in HR, and then the requesting approval happens in both of these. And then it's submitted to allow to move on to HR, and then finance will be the one who be requesting with the check will be generated, the process approved.
Okay, and then, in terms of, I guess, compliance with the provisions, the sort of stipulations, the limitations, the conditions of the kind of program, the parameters. Who do you feel is ultimately sort of responsible for ensuring compliance with those parameters?
I said it previously, that's a collaborative effort. To go back to the earlier discussion. This is a deviation, so there's no. Real best practices to set the protocol in place.
Okay,
Typical employer would not do these things.
okay,
It was identified, if I'm not mistaken, if someone correct me, it was identified during COVID that there was a need. For empowering people to have assistance and employees to receive some type of assistance and help, and there were predatory lenders out there, and they didn't want them to be subject to that, so. The legislature, or excuse me, the resolution identified that this be created to help employees.
okay. I guess like, sort of the question that I'm trying to get clarity on, because I understand it's a collaborative process. And so it's a deviation, the whole program is sort of a deviation, as you mentioned. But my question essentially is, let's say the applicant did not meet with one of the requirements, but the kind of process, along the process of that. Would that sort of deviation be ultimately ascribable to which party? Because you're saying it's a collaborative process, so where does the buck stop when there's deviation from the protocols delineated in the labor and employment law? Where does the buck stop there?
There's a sort of protocol that's in place, we believe is a process that where one ends, another begins. In other words, finance is not going to question or where they're going to have the why, just validate the calculation. The request would be made by the employee to their director, the director would submit that on, and then that would be validated at that point. So we take those steps when it gets to finance, we believe that those things have occurred. So we don't question it and say yes, no, or we're not, we validate that the time is available. And we believe that that process has occurred because it has required signatures, and then we pay from there.
Okay,
It would not make it to finance if it didn't meet the criteria from what we believe.
okay, so just in general, the sort of standard operating procedure is when the sort of documentation is provided, that all of the kind of I's have been dotted and T's have been crossed, and then you're responsible as the finance department for just performing the sort of calculations of the financial monetary number component, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
That's sensitive information, so yes, we try to process it that way, and keep that confidential.
okay. Jason, if we could get up the QC document,
Second,
the QC,
QC,
the legal,
maybe what?
the little QC document.
Is it an email or file?
It's the QC, the CDs. Certificates of deposit.
Oh, Busey,
Yeah.
yes, so sorry. Yeah. Now I understand.
With-
1 second, I'll pull it right up.
So, kind of the next arena of questions that I'm gonna ask is gonna be pretty broad and just based upon your, sort of experience, you know, your deep experience in finance. Just in terms of, I'll be doing that, I'll kind of dive into the sort of first, kind of question I have. So speaker earlier mentioned, the transmission of $16 million, from the casino. And that, of course, is consistent with the Federal Casino Operations Authority Act that, we amended as a legislature in July of this year. And, as we're kind of all familiar with, I think at least among ourselves, there's sort of been an ongoing discussion and, discourse with the Federal Casino Operations Authority Board of Directors about, identifying, funding from the casino to be transferred over in accordance with that, law that now stands from July. And, kind of my question is that, will sort of also provide a little bit more texture. The Federal Casino Operations Act from earlier this year, that was sponsored by Speaker Punis, specifically sort of delineated that the mandate for the casino to transfer over revenue aside from what is required legally as a 120-day retention for operational set asides that are mandated by FIGRA, and move that kind of excess revenue over to the executive branch for investment purposes. And so you kind of mentioned earlier that 60 million and change had been transferred over because the casino effectuated that, I believe, last month. And then, just for context, in setting the table, there has been identified an additional $3.7 million, I believe, by the sort of external financial consultant, Dr. True, that the executive branch enlisted to sort of take a look at the financials, and what would be a fair amount, carved out beyond the 120 days set aside mandated by IBRA. And so I think Dr. Cohen mentioned that we're going to buy $3.7 million, an additional transfer that would need to happen beyond the 60 million, bringing the total kind of up to 20 million or so. And Dr. Cohen kind of went to that sort of number a few weeks ago. I don't believe that's been transferred over in the $3.7 million part, which you confirmed earlier, if I'm not mistaken, and that is waiting on Federal Casino Operations Authority Board of Directors action in order to effectuate or advance that transmission of the $3.7 million. But sort of in terms of this particular document, basically you could scroll down. Kind of the funding in the casino had interesting structures in that over the course of this process, the legislature learned that there were a couple of hundred different accounts in which that kind of money had been divided under casino purview. There was like a 15 account kind of element, 2 accounts, and then I believe 144 accounts. So in your kind of obviously that there are just variables and nuances related to financial complexities, but just generally stated, general kind of question. In your experience as a financial expert, is it easier to manage money when it's centralized in one location? Versus a couple of hundred different locations?
So from the treasury perspective, with the treasury hat, you want to be as aggressive as you can to get the highest rate of return of interest on that money. I believe what you're showing there is, when you look at that, that's what's called, treasury account. Those multiple listings are what you call the term called CDOs. If when you go to an institution and they want to bid, they say, we're gonna pay you X amount return on your funds. Well, collectively, all those institutions share the interest so that you can gain it. And that's because it's a greater amount. So they break it down like that, as you see, it's telling you all those banks or institutions have interest in that greater amount to give you that return. On the other side, when you're investing with the broker, it's called portfolio. It may be high yield, blue chips, no growth, big cap, all different kind of things, but that's typically those what's called a CR. And multiple institutions have an interest in that balance to bring you that return.
Okay. Kind of as I laid out in the table setting component. Obviously, it's been a collaborative process with, the executive branch and listening to Dr. Cohen. To help sort of provide at least a little bit of analysis into some of these kind of funding pools within the casino. And money has been transferred. Are you pretty kind of in that process, to any knowledge about whether money remains in any of these accounts at this juncture post transfer? Or are you kind of feed into that process, or is that not part of your direct knowledge?
That's not any part of my direct knowledge. Finance under the government has not been involved in that, but as I shared with the speaker and other legislators that going forward, if we were to gain that capacity, those institutions to provide you accounts and like we did, you can have access to them at any point in time. But if the institution has that ability, it could be real time, where you could just go online and capture a view of it and move forward. But as a treasurer, as I shared with you, the shrink 16 million over a year, you'll receive a monthly statement.
Right.
That will be provided to you so you can see the interest it's gained.
Right.
So you'll know the balance of the equity.
So I'm just establishing that kind of, obviously that is, the ideal practice and kind of what the thrust of the law passed by the legislature, signed by Chairman Spotted in July, was according to the round, was getting kind of to that transparent point. And so when it's under kind of your purview after it's been transferred, it was invested in, there's gonna be those transparency financial reports. But you have not been along the process, kind of kept abreast of when these accounts have been exhausted or where no funds have remained in them, like sort of in the transfer process, is that correct? You just,
Not the casinos council legislature,
okay,
but I can share the information with you, maybe on VC Bank. VC Bank just acquired Cross First,
okay,
and I believe we have a resolution to do business with Cross First and now VC Bank. So if establishing an account or view only access to an account is something that the legislature would want, I think we can get that worked out.
okay, that'd be great. And thank you for that helpful context, in terms of the acquisition, Cross First. Okay. We're gonna hopscotch around in terms of kind of subject matters. With respect to next discourse, I'm just gonna rely kind of on Chairman Spotted Bird's testimony at his hearing yesterday. We asked him about a specific incident in which kind of former employee of finance, I believe, had brought concerns about use of a private credit card by Mr. Spotted Bird and or his spouse for personal items. And I believe Chairman stipulated that he had or a transaction had occurred at Costco accidentally by his wife, where a tribal credit card was used to purchase personal items at Costco. And that was something that Chairman Spalford conceded. And so, my question to you is, are you familiar with that particular transaction or that particular incident at all? Just, no question.
I am not familiar with that right offhand that I can recall.
Okay,
Let me share a little bit about the credit card process. When I came on board, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say 4, but there may be 5. There were 4 credit cards out and around the tribe. The chairman had one, the vice chairman had one, screen printing had one, and procurement had one. We've since closed all those credit cards, so there's no activity on the credit cards. Those cards were listed in the individual's names. The tribe was just paying for it, but it was listed under the tribe and the individual's name, so they were ultimately responsible for it.
okay,
We've since closed that whole process out, and we have a new protocol that we're putting in place in the training and hold it accountability.
okay. When did the shift occur approximately from, when did that practice end where folks had tribal credit cards in their individual names?
That probably took a 9-month period, after I came on board, reason being, procurement was doing all the traveling. And the person that was previously in procurement, that was privileged to be able to do that, allowed us, we had a conversation and had accountability. That we were allowed to continue to do that, so we wouldn't have to stop travel and then, when I arrived, it was a tough situation for the tribe, getting credit and being credit extended and paying bills and being timely and things of that nature, so. We had a conversation and we were afforded the opportunity to continue using that, and we did that to the point in time which we were closing it.
Okay, so around 9 months after you came on board, and I'm not expecting precision, but that would be ballpark. August and September-ish of 2024, right?
I believe that's.
Okay. Was there ever an employee of the tribe named Rose Garza who you're familiar with?
Yes,
Okay, and did she work in finance?
she did.
Okay, and was she in charge of, and I'm sure reconciling credit cards?
I believe that was one of her responsibilities.
Okay. Did she ever voice concerns to you about misuse of credit cards by the chairman and or his spouse?
She voiced concerns about not receiving support documentation for some of the transactions.
Okay.
Implying that something was unacceptable, acceptable. I was not able to look into it like that, because the transactions of the credit cards were blind, that's why they got written. Implying that the credit card was listed under the employee's name, it was their responsibility. As a credit card, they can go out and charge what they want to. The blind aspect of that I'm referring to is that finance would not be aware of what transactions occurred until the credit card statement came in at the end of the month.
Okay,
And therefore we moved completely away from that and back to the credit card requisitions that people require something, no question. Of course, as the chairman and the vice chairman, there's things that they do that are expected and are acceptable, that may deviate from any other department or things that the departments can do.
whenever those credit cards were in use, kind of during the initial period when you came on board, and they were sort of in the individual names. You're mentioning that you would not be kind of aware of what the cards were used for until the statements came in. And so my question is, I know on my bank statement, sometimes, it just says, when I go to Target, like, the bank statement says, this is the debit, and it says Target or Amazon. Without any sort of itemization of what kind of was charged. So during the process, the financial processes, kind of when those cards were in use, was there ever a requirement for the person using the federal credit card in their name to supply receipt documentation for what was purchased at any juncture?
Yes, upon my arrival, that's what Ms. Garza was doing, as one of her job duties.
Okay,
And if she was not receiving that information, she would bring it to my attention. And I would tell her to send an email and CC me, and if she didn't get a response, then we would follow up. So there was many instances where I would her to request it until a certain point in time, and then I would set and request that information.
okay. And so he voiced concerns at least once about not receiving support documentation for credit card charges made by the chairman, is that correct?
She was concerned about not receiving support documentation from multiple individuals, not just the chairman. But they had a credit card, remember, there were only 4 or 5 credit cards, so there were
Yeah.
only 4 or 5 individuals. And she voiced that about price. She voiced that about procurement, she voiced that about Indian City Clinic. So that was a concern, but as again, remember what I said, those transactions were blind until the end of the statement period. Rather than 30 to 35-day period. So they would be able from period ending to period beginning using the credit card. And there was no information available until the end of that statement. And she would gain statements, say, hey, I need support competition for the following transactions. But it was in the individual's name and Redford Finance didn't have access to it.
So. I mean, I'm learning kind of about that particular specifics of those mechanics now, which is just an interesting sort of SOP. I'm glad you realigned kind of that into like different protocol in 2024. So it sounds like Ms. Garza raised multiple concerns about, just broadly speaking, raised multiple concerns about kind of not getting documentation for those particular credit card usage. Okay. In terms of kind of next sequence, I'm just going to go to 45.
Sure.
I sort of have a specific question about airfare and travel to Korea, taken by Aaron Father and by his spouse. So yesterday during our discourse, Aaron Father sort of specified one instance when I believe in 2024, July of that month, he and his wife traveled to Korea for a conference that was owned by an organization that's Korean owned called Indigenous Leaders of North America. And he mentioned that in that specific instance, the tribe paid for both his airfare and his wife's airfare. And then the Indigenous Leaders of North America wrote a check back to the tribe, and that's effectively confirmed the documentation. At least we have a record of the check. The Indigenous Leaders of North America paid back about $2,700, if you can go to the check, to the tribe for this Father Bird's tipping. And so I guess my question broadly is, have there been other instances kind of during your time at the tribe where spouses of employees have been paid for and then reimbursed for the travel? Is that, I guess, just to the best of your recollection or knowledge, has that occurred in other instances?
I'm not aware of that's occurred in other instances, but legislative. That reimbursement and reimbursements to the tribe first extending fund for travel is common in Union country. There's several organizations where they would be what's called sponsored traveling. And once the tribe travels, they'll send information back and pay for the kind of all departments that happens throughout. So that's typical.
Okay, is that typical among folks who are not tribal employees?
Not that I'm aware of. We only would deal with the elements of the tribe. But if I'm not mistaken, I think all that travel was reimbursed, but sometimes they say, if you get there, we'll make sure you get paid or we'll pay it back. And so they go on that office, like you said, that offer and acceptance, and that's on the agreement. We will reimburse you for this, but you kind of have to incur it and then we'll pay you.
Right, and the process that you're talking about though, is that most of the time undertaken by tribal employees, like where the travel is reimbursed. Does that make sense?
So there's been instances where that travel reimbursement was actually sent to the employees and the employees then in turn turned it into finance.
Right.
And finance would make
Okay.
the fund whole.
My question is tribal employee that you're talking about who engage in that process, right?
Yes, we're talking about travel employees.
Hey, Jason, can we move over to the pass through companies? So while Jason is sort of pointing out documents, then
Sure. Can I add one thing to that? Let's say, there are instances where, there are employees that probably travel. And when they do travel, and they just spouses or their partners along with them, but that's on their dollar. And in this instance, they reimburse, if you pay up front, they reimburse, but to sometimes be accompanied by your spouse or your partner, your family. That does occur from time to time, what we do. If sometimes people ask, can they drive, and we'll say, yes, you can drive, we just justify the request that, but we only allow them up to the amount of the airfare for the mileage, so we sometimes try to work and give them that flexibility and that benefit to enjoy that.
Okay, I think legislator Rosani had a question, and I'm gonna yield my time to her. Yes, legislator Rosani.
Thank you. I have a question. Was one of the credit cards in Mrs. Spotted name?
Yes, I believe they have their names on them.
And when it comes to the travel for Korea, the initiated act was from the Kiowa tribe first. And then when they got back, they were reimbursed. But they told everybody that that company paid for the trip. But actually, it was the tribe that initiated it. And then they got reimbursed. I've never heard of a spouse using Kiowa funds. You were stating that the credit cards were in the employee's name. At the time, she wasn't an employee. So access to these funds and the credit card, is that common practice for any chairman or chairman's spouse for the tribe to pay for those things for the spouse?
I can't speak to that. As I shared with you, those credit cards were in the individual's possession because they had the individual's name on them. But what Ms. Garza would do was when she was here and would come back, she would go through that and ask for support documentation. So in that capacity, if the chairman decided he was going to travel and wanted to make those arrangements to travel, he could do that because he had that credit card that allowed him to do that, and then documentation would have been requested once he returned. There are times he or the vice chairman may need to travel that we can't accommodate him because he's on one trip and he needs to go to another trip, and he'll say, I'll make this arrangement, I'll take this, and then when I come back, I'll give you the detail of where it needs to be paid.
And why was the credit card made out to Mr. Spotted Bird's wife? If she
No.
wasn't an employee,
She didn't have a credit card, it would have been the chairman's credit card.
so it was on his credit card, not
Yes.
her on the credit card.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Speaker, can I just get, I just want him to clarify that on the record, because it sounded like you said the chairman's wife had a credit card in her name that was used by the tribe. So I just want to clarify, so everybody online perfectly clear, there was no tribal credit card in the chairman's wife's name.
Emphatic no, there are only 4 credit cards,
Okay.
chairman, vice chairman, procurement, and Indian City.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that because it sounded something different.
Yeah, yes, I heard that earlier.
Yes.
Is that how you understood it?
Yes.
Okay.
Clarify that for the people that are online. Because at the end of the day, we have to understand that we're responsible for the Kiowa people's money. This is not our money, it's their money, and we're the stewards of their money. And when they see these little deviations or whatever happening, you know, they always ask, well, what about me? You know, why can't I get any help? Why can't I get this? Why can't I get that? And then they see these things and then they start talking online about it. And, you know, I heard about the travel and everybody was saying, you know, well, you know, tribe paid for her ticket. And in some instances, they were actually right, you know, but I didn't believe them at the time until I seen the paperwork. And so they tried initiated the payment, but at the end it got reimbursed. But so they were half right, You know what I mean? But I didn't believe him at the time. And when I seen the paperwork, it doesn't make it look good. You know, because even though that company paid back the funds, we as a tribe ended up paying for it to get first. And I've never heard such a thing. I mean, you know, I can get my husband to advocate for him to go to the movie show. But I'm just saying, it's just not normal. But yes, I'm gonna go back. I tried.
Yes, legislator DeLong.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Legislator Rosario. So it's a broad question. Obviously, we have, as a tribe, been relying on ARPA for a lot of programmatic allocations over the course of kind of the past half decade or so around this. Is that a fair characterization?
ARPA is supplementing, the impact of loss revenue as tribes to operate that school.
Right. And ARPA, for example, subsidizes the barrier program, if I'm not mistaken, is that correct? And there are analogs where other programs are subsidized currently and over the past couple of years by ARPA money. Okay. And we are going to be looking or anticipating at sort of expiration of ARPA monies, where we have to expend them by, you know, relatively quick horizon. Is that a fair assessment?
So, legislature to be clear, some of the ARPA money is already gone.
Right. And
What's left has to be expended, had to be committed by December 30, 2024. It has to be expended by December 30.
yes, okay. So ARPA was also, in prior years, utilized to subsidize the elder payments. Okay, and so with the mandate, the federal kind of authorizing law, articulating the mandates of ARPA, we have to expend that by the close of this year, I believe. The things that have been subsidized by ARPA, we're going to have to find money from other sources to effectively, if we want to continue some of those programs, we're going to have to find financial sourcing from other areas. Is that fair assessment? Okay. So we are anticipating, I mean, the ARPA money has been extended, as you said, over the course of a couple of years. And we have to expend by the end of, I believe, this calendar year, correct? 26. Okay, is it in the fiscal year 26 or calendar year? Okay, so December 31st, 2026, all of the money has to be expended. At that point, obviously, that's halfway through a fiscal year, so we're looking at a sort of different financial picture than what we've had with certain things that have been in place while ARPA funds have subsidized with one program, that fair characterization. Correct. Okay. With respect to this particular kind of Castro and Company correspondence, just to provide context for the record, we first became aware of an OMT Department of Treasury investigation into expenditures for coronavirus relief funds in around April of this year. And I believe the kind of Department of Treasury been taking a look or performing an analysis since at least January of 2024, if I'm not mistaken. And we enlisted a accounting firm in Virginia called Castro and Company to perform a desk review for them to take a look at whether or not costs were questioned in terms of those coronavirus relief fund monies. And we actually, as a legislature, learned about this from social media because the executive branch never mentioned it put forward to us. And I wanna kind of be clear that the kind of scope or time span that is being questioned or sort of taken surveyed by the Department of Treasury, OIG, that is sort of encompasses March 2020, I believe, to September of 2022. So you obviously were not on board during the time frame that the expenditures were made. That was well before you came on board, and I believe it was effectively before Chairman Sponberg came on board. Because he would have only been in office for about maybe a month and a half during that tenure, 2.5 months maybe. Since kind of the review with Thomas and everything up to September of 2022. Given those parameters, do you happen to know the figure that was identified as question costs by the Castro Company review in terms of coronavirus, at least funds for the tribe?
I think that letter referred to about $8.5 million.
Okay. And so, in terms of question costs. I believe the Catherine Company correspondence did identify about $8 million approximately in question costs. And if I'm not mistaken, the sort of desk review stipulates that it utilized sort of a randomized sampling method, so that it's sort of statistically impossible to extrapolate out what the total kind of scope of question costs might be. But when there are question costs identified by the feds, in a program like this, in your experience, is there a possibility of efforts by the federal government or federal institutions, agencies? Is there ever an effort when there are question costs and there's a final determination after review of those question costs, is there ever an effort to claw back or recoup those funds if they were found in deviation from protocols?
If it's substantiated, they would ask for repayment of those.
Okay, so the process, as I understand it, is they kind of initiate their review, they're identifying these costs, they communicated and to the tribe, I believe. The sort of at least to a certain extent, I believe that the tribe has been communicating with them from the executive branch's angle since January of 2024. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So ongoing sort of discourse into, I know that you guys as an executive branch have provided documentation to substantiate or your positions that the documentation that you provided will hopefully substantiate a lot of the question costs or the expenditures that they've identified. Is that correct? Is that
Refute the cost, correct.
okay? So we'll refute the question cost, but substantiate the expenditure. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then you submitted the sort of documentation for the question costs. Have you guys heard anything back since then?
We've not heard anything from them.
Okay. Well, typically, something like this is a process that takes, as sort of the timeline establishes, this is kind of the process and the back and forth that can last a year or two or multiple years.
That is correct in light of what's going on in the government environment. There are a lot of people not working, so this particular situation may be longer than that.
Okay. That's helpful, so thank you for kind of that context, I'm not expecting an answer.
Legislator,
Yeah.
need a little back history on that. You indicated that the legislature was not aware of that. Upon research, the information that I found, and I think I'm sure with the legislature, is that those inquiries had been made back in 2021 and 2022 about some information that had been, I guess, proposed to the Treasury, so they made inquiries to the tribe on behalf of that information. So I say that to say this process began in 2022, 2021, 22, where they were requesting things, and there was back and forth and back and forth. And it just culminated to that point where, you know, I would like they engaged in sort of desk review, and we came to that point that we just put it all in front of you, but from my understanding is that I do the emails. I believe the requests and all these questions in the back and forth and the interaction with actually 2022.
Okay. I don't think that necessarily, I mean, that's helpful context, I don't think it necessarily kind of like, at least from my vantage point, the legislature learned about this whole process in April of this year. And so there was no interaction with the executive branch, kind of in a year and a half prior when I initiated this review. So I don't think our statements are in contradiction. We'll see that. You know, you're talking about the correspondence with the dialogue beginning back in 2021. That's correct. So
That's correct, as I said, and I told you at that point in time, I took responsibility for that, because I had beliefs that had been ongoing for years before I got here, that the auditor was aware of everything, and it was brought to my attention when we weren't, I see with that, I accept responsibility for that, because I should have immediately brought it to their attention.
Yeah.
So there was no intention to be not forthcoming and hide anything, I just was under the assumption that they knew what was going on, because there was a previous administration and things that had occurred, and
Yeah.
I was incorrect, so that's in the.
yeah, I mean, I don't think we're in this alignment on that particular point. In terms of kind of next sequence of questions, I had some particular query about the local and tribal consistency funds. A little, but I did want to sort of just provide the context in terms of we're talking about ARPA, the money is going to be required by federal law to be expended by the calendar year 2026. You know, obviously that's going to reshape and reconfigure our kind of financial outlook, so I think that's gives context in conjunction with what you just mentioned, which is, theoretically, if the federal government does not sort of accept substantiation or reputation or question costs coronavirus, we talk about this, and we're theoretically potentially going to be looking at clawbacks. We can't really anticipate or calculate those. But that sort of gives context to why we're trying to get, as a legislature, a accurate assessment of all of the variables kind of playing in to the financial welfare and kind of financial status of the tribe. Taking a look at the time, and we've got lunch arriving. I'm going to speaker actually make a motion now to
Second that.
break for about 45 minutes, 1 hour, so 1 hour. And that would be 1:16.
Make it 1 o'clock.
We make there's a motion and a second to recess for lunch until 1:15. All in favor, say aye. 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 All opposed?
Nay. I'm gonna extend an invite to the people on Zoom. We do our regular session every second Saturday at 9 o'clock. The next one will be November the 8th. We invite you all back to log in and then hear the regular agenda of the regular session. I know this is a special hearing, we had great turnout for this, but we also would like to invite all of our citizens. They can come in person or they can be on Zoom. They do post our announcements to the Kiowa Tribe's Facebook page, it's on the website, under the legislative webpage, as well as our legislative webpage. So I know we have a lot of people tuning in today, so it's been great participation. We just want to see that continued in our regular sessions. Ian?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to reconvene. All in favor, say aye.
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 Speaker, before we dive in, we have a prospective member of the community who just had a chance to see Chairman, KCOA Chairman Mac Mahon's public opening statement that he circulated on social media over the past couple of days. That of course has been entered into evidence. And she's specifically kind of mentioned in that opening statement, she just has asked for the opportunity to clarify some inaccuracies. And that opening statement by Mr. Matt Mahon. So I'm making a motion that after we conclude here imminently with Mr. Weaver and Mr. Boyfoya, that we amend the agenda to include testimony from Vivi Old Bear.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We approve the agenda to add,
Speaker, can you restate, we've got some legislators returning from lunch.
okay,
Can you restate so they're aware of what we're motion?
okay. We have a motion and a second to amend the agenda to include statement from Jimmy, or testimony from Jimmy over. So at this time, I call for a vote.
Tyler Tattletee.
Yes.
Michael Primus.
Yes.
Timothy Saypoodle,
Yes.
Cole DeLon,
Yes.
Taya Rosario,
Yes.
Ben Wolf.
Yeah.
Warren Weathon.
Yes.
Motion passes 7 yes, 0 no, 0 abstain, and 0 absent.
At this time. I don't know, we can legislator go on.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Weaver, thanks for your time here with us today. Kind of, we'll switch topics a little bit. Local and tribal consistency funds, we've discussed those periodically and currently over the course of kind of the spring. It's cropped up in conversations, particularly, I believe, around circa May, when we identified that the executive branch kind of wanted, or the chairman rather, specifically wanted to source funds for how we can get some juncture from local and tribal consistency funds. So I know that those have been in our tribal control for at least some time now, because they've been included on the fiscal year 25 budget, and then the fiscal year 26 budget that was drafted by Chairman Spotted this past spring. Have any funding, have any funds from that particular line item, kind of general pool, have any funds been expended to date while they've been under tribal purview?
They've been allocated out to some departments for assistance and additional things of that nature.
Okay, so any money's been drawn down from those, to your knowledge?
When you say drawn down,
Like, have they've been allocated out to departments, so have those departments utilized them or extended them?
yes,
Okay. This is a really kind of precise question, but on the screen, we have the budget workbook. Completed, I believe, by Michelle Babcock is listed as the author there. And we've got local and tribal consistency funds for fiscal year 25 included in that workbook. And those are at, the kind of amount there that you can see is $3,778,000 and change, I believe. And so when we take a look at the workbook for fiscal year 26 that Chairman Spotted drafted this past spring, the amount actually is almost identical. It goes up by, I believe, about 30 cents. So it's $3,778,000 in the kind of workbook for fiscal year 26 too. And it was just a point of curiosity for me, because it's a very static amount that hasn't shifted from one year to the next. So is that have the funds been extended kind of after that point, or what was the situation there in terms of the amount remaining identical?
the legislator, on that budget, what you have is a workbook. That is what the chairman uses, the deputy CFO, the CFO, and the legislature will collaborate and most, and you will go back and so the share versions.
Yeah.
It's back out there, because she's a little weird and she makes changes.
Okay,
That amount listed in there. Has to be listed in there as a recognize to show you the revenue that's necessarily available at that point in time.
okay,
But at that point in time is what is estimated to be. Some of it that's used by the department would reduce what becomes available. So when you look at that budget, remember that budget was modified or was needed to you. That was the estimated amount. I think the departments have drawn from it, they need assistance and things like that. That number is probably reduced. So I would.
okay, so it's just an estimate at that juncture.
So it's just a budget.
And that accounts for, like, prior to finalization, it would be, kind of amendment to reflect any drawdowns or any expenditures that was taken from that.
Right.
From that.
So when we present that to you, we're showing you what may be available as revenue sources for all those areas on revenues, and saying these are what we believe will be available, time we were making this budget.
Okay, do you happen to know, and I'm not asking for precision, but just a general ballpark of how much is left in the LAPCF kind of for?
I would guess to say about it's committed, so probably about 2 million, 1.7 million, about
Okay.
2 million left available, but it has to be committed and obligated.
Okay. Thank you, that's all the questions that I have, Mr. Weaver, speaker.
See. Thank you, Legislator DeLong. I'll turn it over to Legislator.
Mr. Troy, thank you for appearing before the legislature today. My questions center around whistleblower protection in regards to I guess a instance, that's what I'll classify it as, with Abraham Pedro. I just have some questions about this topic. What communications existed regarding Abraham Pedro, particularly concerning his invocation of whistleblower protections in 2025?
So. Are you asking me what specific, like?
If you would give us the
Email?
context of what happened, if it's email,
Okay.
kind of give us your understanding.
So essentially, Mr. Pedro came in to full employment in December of 24. Which is rolling into this year. And then once he was working for grants and planning, he was brought in as a grant writer. So coming in as a grant writer, you know, we had some flux and change in that department, so we had Ms. Lama Zotai as the grants planning director at that time. There were some changes with her in that department, and so with Mr. Pedro, he was changed over to the interim director and kind of given some duties and responsibilities in that capacity. However, I was still managing the grants and planning department as a senior person that was over that department. So again, in that capacity, he was a probationary employee. He was not a full director. So he was given certain guidance and a certain limited amount of authority for the position. So he was learning, right? He's learning the position. He was, I was giving him, a little bit more authority over some of the grants, getting into the portals, which again, upon him coming into the position, he was openly frank about his experience with several of the other grant portals that were in the system, and some of these are more federal type grants. So he did explain that he was limited in some of those grants and in the function of organizations like SAMHSA and TOR is part of SAMHSA as well too. But a lot of the federal systems and portals
he openly said that he was a little bit unfamiliar with them, and he was more familiar with foundational grants and foundational grants and applying for those. So still being in charge of the department, you know, gave him a bit of authority to kind of make those decisions. And so as far as any whistleblower issue, you know, I believe that I think the issue of it was more like he kind of didn't understand the process, and certainly not the chain of command. He did not make me aware of any issue that he was having with a certain grant. But you know, just again to clarify the situation, right? He wasn't in charge. I was in charge. So in giving him the limited amount of authority, I also gave him the information of what the issues were with the grants. I brought these issues to him. I did not, they didn't come out of thin air. He did not discover these. He was given these. And he was given them on the premise of, hey, help us fix them.
Yeah.
Not, let's make these a bigger problem or a bigger issue. So in that sense, you know, he was a little bit misguided. He kind of was, took it upon himself to kind of take a little bit more authority than he should have had. He did, again, I don't want to be too disparaging about him. He's not here to defend himself. But the thing was, he just didn't do things properly and follow the chain of command. And that was not just in this case, it was in several cases and instances, which again, I signed things, right? I'm responsible. You guys see my signature as executive director, and when you see those things, you say, well, he's the guy that signed it. So, you know, especially with these grants and especially with these portals, and like I said, we did have Miss Sotai in there till December, but then after that, it was a complete catch-up game, right? We were kind of really in flux. We brought several employees in that we had in there, and really, Mr. Pedro was the next man up. He showed some good capability to write a grant. He showed that he had the verbiage down and could keep within the boundaries of some of these grants. So that was great. I thought that was promising. I thought it showed that he had potential, but there were just some, authority things he kind of took liberties with that kind of were not in his scope of authority. So, as a boss, as the authority over the position, I have to, pull them aside, have some of these, counselings is what I call them. When we talk about a thing, we say, hey, you should take a couple steps back, you should do this. And again, it's very procedural. It was very respectful. I've never been disrespectful to anybody, and never, as a boss, I don't believe that disrespect of any kind is ever going to get you anywhere with any of your employees. So, again, I think on that end, these whistleblower accounts that came up, they were really, confounding to me because I was not aware that there was that big an issue. We did have grants that needed attention. They needed to be managed better. And that was my guidance to him. Come in, we know these are problems, we gotta get them fixed. So as far as the whistleblower, I don't know where that came out. It would be the grievance about that. So,
Is there a whistleblower protection included in the human resources policy that you're aware of?
so the policy that we have is fairly old. So as far as my knowledge of it, I don't know of one that's in there.
And I know that the tribe is looking at updating its human resources policy. Do you see that coming to the legislature just for review anytime soon?
So, right now, we are in the, final stages of going through them, and, I talked with HR. We're gonna start going through them chapter by chapter, so we certainly will, include you in those. I'll make sure that you all are included in them. Again, you know, those types of things, the policy, we certainly want to involve you all with it. So, but, again, they haven't been addressed since I've been here, so we're just now in the stage of finalizing.
In your own opinion, do you see there being a need for a law? Because policy is not law. Law should reflect, I mean, policy should reflect the law itself. Do you see there being a need to have a human resources law books kind of in alignment with that policy?
Well, I mean, certainly policy is, right? I mean, policy is what we're doing. As administration, we follow all the policies that are in there. I know that I've had my assistant print out all of the laws that you all have on the books. And so then I've been trying to, you know, within reason last year, make sure to look and make sure that our current policies align with those, right? We don't want to be out of compliance with that. So, as far as that is concerned, I mean, you can, I don't know if you want to get in. I think with policy, we don't want policy to be the stick, right? I mean, there is some sort of, latitude you want to give your executives to make a decision, especially when, you know, we're not gonna get everything in black and white. There's always gonna be those gray areas in policy. So, certainly, I think that there should be something with human resources, because again, you know, we conduct ourselves by what you all put down to us, but also sometimes we have to make those gray area decisions. So I can see that.
And I think that when I bring that up, you know, I think having law, something that, I don't want to limit you to say, this is it, this is what your policy has to go by, that's not what I'm saying, that, but just supporting the executive branch's ability to make its own policy and then follow its own policy. Cause I think that's where we kind of get into a little bit of a pickle, right? We're a legislative branch, we deal with laws, resolutions, the budget. We should not be getting into issues of policy. Are there any internal or external inquiry processes that were initiated as a result of Mr. Pedro's claims?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Thank you for answering those questions. I'll move on to my next question, was in regards to the tribe's financial hardship program, particularly for employees. Could you give a detailed account of how that financial hardship program works, its structure, eligibility requirements? And then, you know, how those are distributed to employees or other officials.
So I think one of the major things we have a problem with, well, I won't say we have a problem with, I had kind of some reservations, so to speak, about it, was when it first came to my attention that we as a tribe, you know, did that for employees. I kind of had some reservations because I felt like, you know, it's kind of like making loans out to people. We don't have the mechanism to be a loan company. It's a lot of administrative work. It's a lot of like, certainly what legislator DeLon had brought up, you know, who, or maybe it was legislator Primus, who is responsible for making those final determinations, right, and decisions. So once it was brought to my attention that there was a law in the books that said, okay, here is what the law says about financial hardship loans. And so I went through and looked at them, what the law had said, made sure that the application reflected what the laws were, that in human resources, and mind you, there's a lot of moving parts in the year and a half I've been here, right? I mean, we've only received a really functional HR sort of department since probably December of this year, January of this year. So when these loans were brought to my attention over 6, 7, 8 months ago, there were things that we had tried to implement and institute as far as who makes these decisions. And I'll tell you, when I first got in here, most of the decisions were from the HR department, right? So whoever was leading HR at that time, there were two different ladies that were leading HR. And of course, they were interim basis, but again, there just wasn't any continuity on how we would perform in those functions. So as we solidified HR, we now have a permanent HR person in there, a permanent director. Now we have a process where any type of hardship is verified by them. Is the numbers are verified. Certainly there's employment implications as well. Having been here a year, there were a lot of things that were denoted in the resolution itself or the law itself. So, anything prior to, really this year, we've gone through and kind of looked at to make sure that the law was followed. And it was, we didn't do anything outside of what was allowed by the legislator. So I think in that sense, what we're trying to do right now is just sort of create that process, right?
Sure.
The procedure. So once we have that procedure, then who signs off on it? And ultimately, yes, I sign off on them. I want to make sure that I have a second pair of eyes looking at that. So, and especially someone who's dedicated to looking at HR and knows specifically employee history for each of these individuals, because we get requests from all departments, right? And so we have 4 executive directors for 4 different departments. So now, because I am the executive director of operations, I want to kind of centralize that signature. Even though we do have those executive directors, they don't have the access to human resources that I do. And the system that we use. So I don't think it's fair to them to sign off on something that they don't have the access to actually look at, okay, is HR vetting this employee and their history and those kind of things, whereas I do. So I think that's how we're gonna do the procedure for this one. So it just centralizes things, and of course, be careful what you wish for, right? So if I'm on one signature, I need to make sure that everything is following procedure.
And Mr. Troy, I'm going to clarify, we I don't think we necessarily need a human resources law, but just to review the Labor and Employment Act that we passed, I think in 2023. I'm not sure, 2023, somewhere around that timeline. If you could review that, the executive branch has complete authority to set its own policy. So, as long as it's shared with us and because we want to kind of align our policies with what the Kiowa tribe uses for the executive branch. So just make sure you review that. Thank you for answering that question on financial hardship, Bill. My final questions, were you employed by the Kiowa tribe as an executive director while the tribe was operating its Indian City screen printing business?
So I started employment in February of 26, and the screen printing business was still
26.
Sorry, 24.
Okay.
The 26th is the date.
Yeah.
So February 26th to 24. And yes, the business was semi-functional.
And so you oversaw the expenditures for that business. Did you have what was your relationship with the Indian City screen printing business?
No, essentially what my, dealing with it was, so that was probably, I was maybe 2 months into the job. And there were just, prior to me being employed, I knew about the screen printing business and being a citizen, speaking with other citizens. Hey, what is this? What are we doing? What is it? So that was prior to being employed. Once I got employed, I looked into it because it was still an issue. There were citizens, I live in Anadarko, so I drive by it every day. So, there were some accusations about a mobile home out there and things, well, what are we doing with it? So I took it upon myself to, say, Derek, I need to look at it and what is our dealings with it? What are who's running it. I knew the name of the person running it and so just dig into it and find out what's going on, so. As far as any type of approvals for expenditures out of it, it wasn't part of my microwave. Approval, didn't make any approvals for expenditures. As far as I know, I was brought in the back end to see what they were doing, who was running it. What were any kind of invoices closing out, and essentially we were kind of closing out the dealings, so. I was part of the closeout, I really wasn't part of any business or whatever you had, so.
Did you have any personal relationship with the person running that business?
No.
Okay, no personal relationship, okay. So I have another question, and it goes back to the HR policy.
Mhm.
What does the current HR policy, does it address violations of nepotism in there?
So it does, but I think the issue was that it was, in some ways, it seemed like it was very, comprehensive, I guess is a good way to say it. I mean, it covered every sort of relationship, so I think that there was a sort of a kind of move to kind of, I guess, streamline it more, I think it covered everything, right? So I don't think it was, it wasn't really specific to, you know, how we do things at the time, but I mean, you know, nepotism is nepotism, right? And you had your immediate relations, brother, sister, but I think it went down to, it was so comprehensive again, so I think there was making some adjustments too. Until of course, we received guidance from you all this year, sir.
So have you yourself ever had to, have you ever been accused or had to deal with or address an issue where you might yourself been put in a situation where nepotism was questioned?
I don't believe so.
I ask that because, you know, you hear things all the time, and that's why we come to you and just ask you directly.
Sure.
So you yourself have never violated our nepotism policy as a executive director, okay?
No.
So I guess moving forward, you know, I appreciate, I know you came to us, you were the first executive director overseeing 30 programs. There's a lot to that, I understand that, and moving forward, I'd like to see a new HR policy that addresses all these things we've talked about, the financial hardship loan, nepotism. You know, what are the guidelines? We really need to update the HR policy we're currently under is 2011. It still references Kiowa Business Committee.
Yes,
It
sir.
references the hearing board, election board, all that needs to be updated. So that's my personal request to you. We need to get that worked.
Yes, sir, and that's what we're working on right now, again, just a lot of the verbiage, clearing it up, because you're exactly right. Referring to a lot of those entities that aren't here anymore, it becomes a lot confusing, not just the way.
Thank you, Mr. Toyko. That's all of my questions for Mr. Toyko at this time, Speaker.
Okay, thank you, legislator. We thought, I believe that.
Speaker, I have a few quick questions for Mr. Toy.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us, Mr. Toy. So, I just want to revisit kind of the Abraham Pedro question.
Sure.
And some of the specific events kind of within that whole umbrella, because I think that particular sort of episode was just a cause of some confusion among the legislature. So just for kind of context, and table setting, over the course of the spring of 2025, with the executive branches and the chairman's kind of broad awareness, the legislature had been liaising individually with different programs to get an idea and ascertain sort of the specific situational awareness related to kind of the financial operations of each program or department or kind of each team in the kind of service of constructing an accurate budget. So obviously it makes the most sense to kind of liaise you know, each particular department and head to get an idea, are those financial allocations being kind of optimized, or are they serving the interest of operations and mechanics of each program, or do we need to sort of reconstruct some of the line items, just kind of that, just general conversation. And so I know that prior to us discussing a couple of those variables with Mr. Pedro in his capacity as interim grants planning director, we had a week prior, this all occurred at the end of May, but kind of the week prior, we had a discussion or sort of a just general discourse with the chairman. And he was kind of aware at that juncture of the fact that we were, you know, meeting and liaising with each of these kind of different programs. But I believe we had a meeting with Mr. Pedro to get the idea of, you know, does the amounts allocated for kind of the budget make sense, or does there need to be different kind of nuances, adjustments in the upcoming fiscal year? I believe the finance team was there. I do not believe Karen Stoddard was there at that time. But kind of prior to that, we had done a lot of our discussions about that with Mr. Weaver and Ms. Babcock and Mr. Stoddard collectively. So we have that meeting after kind of word around 30, I think, with Mr. Weaver. And then he had, you know, addressed general questions like, does the budget make sense? Does there need to be kind of amendments or kind of adjustments in the amounts? What makes the most sense? Can you give us that feedback? And so he, at least through my personal kind of subjective interpretation, been pretty professional and seemed pretty knowledgeable in that discourse. And then on June 6th, he sends an email to the legislature with new copy and I think recent parts. I'm not gonna dive into kind of everything, but I think so he says, our legislature, good afternoon to you. I started to find you well. Dive into advocating for a salary adjustment for himself, strategic staffing recommendations, and what he thinks the appropriate kind of allocations would be. He advocates for the policy and personnel manual development. And also talks about wanting to or have some sort of infrastructural support for Iowa Grants Academy and mentorship initiative. We just talked about kind of, you know, expanded planning capacity and the plan for that. So it's pretty broad and just, you know, organizational in nature. At the beginning of that email, he says, however, at the request of the executive director and my direct supervisor, Mr. Marlon Boyd, I won't be able to share board information until public announcements are made for these board grants. Was that an accurate characterization of your position for director to him?
No, and then again, when I counsel, my subordinates, these are done in private, because, you know, especially with this, there was a lot of, again, there was a lot of, just kind of, and I won't characterize it too negative, but you know, there were some things that he was.
Can I just interject really quickly? Sure. I know where you're going. I just want to stipulate that we don't, I'm effectively in terms of like, we don't want us to stuff up.
Right.
That's what that's not.
Right.
I'm just kind of teeing up the question. That's a pretty narrow query about whether or not that characterization is accurate. So that's okay. And yeah, I just want to make sure that we don't dive into the specifics of the personnel component. That's not what we're interested in. Just want to make that clear. Okay, so with that kind of email went out, he also kind of, at least in there, sort of nodded chain of command, because he says, following chain of command, I'd like to have a follow-up meeting with my department, the legislature and the executive director, kind of to address the projects. So at least from kind of like my perspective, and it seems professional and appropriate, kind of in the broad scope. And of course, I'm stipulating that I don't know what the kind of interactions that you've had, or what the sort of specific kind of interdepartmental or interdivision kind of interactions have been. So I have no way, so that at least from kind of this email, it seems broadly cordial and courteous. And then you sent an email in response, kind of copying us all, and said that you were saying discussion of your salary with anyone other than your immediate supervisor is professional. And then say, and directing you to end this email discussion with the legislative branch. legislators, I apologize for my subordinate, bringing a confidential work discussion to you all without following the proper procedure. I guess at least from kind of like the angle at that point, it's very surprising because we had these kind of planning sessions or discussion sessions with different programs, with Chairman Spotted Bird's full awareness and the finance department's full awareness kind of over the course of the spring. It's not an issue. And then we have you saying that effectively kind of you're directing him to terminate discourse with us. When kind of at least what we had discussed with him was again within the scope of kind of do these budgetary allocations make sense? So it was just very jarring at that point where there's kind of an intervention to just say, I'm directing you to stop talking to the legislature at this point.
Yeah, it certainly is incumbent upon me to take responsibility for that email not being thorough.
Okay.
I was specifically talking about the language about his compensation. You know, he had never brought that to me as being a point of any kind of conversation that he was wanting. However, to the whole process, you know, yes, Chairman was aware. You say that he was aware, so I'm sure that he was aware, but you know, I'm Mr. Pedro's supervisor, and I was not aware that these conversations or inquiries were being done. Still, yes, the email went out because of the remarks about his concerns with his compensation. It was certainly not to cease any talks with the legislators. I would never do that. However, you know, it did come off like that. My apologies. I didn't mean for it to be misconstrued that way. I just didn't appreciate if he had a concern about what his compensation was, that he followed the chain of command and brought it to my attention because I wasn't aware that he was you know, wanting that type of increase.
Okay. Kind of like a follow-up question on that. So that email, which is the first kind of moment where you're kind of entering the discourse in a kind of very vocal way. You say, Mr. Pedro, you will meet with Ms. Delgado about it on Monday morning to assess this matter. So at that juncture, it seems like there was a disciplinary component already in play or kind of in the offing. If the director was to meet with the HR director and you at 8 AM, like, you know, on Monday mornings, this is going on Friday. So was there a disciplinary component like that time?
No, because he didn't show up. But there was a prior counseling that was had before, which is why he sent that email to you saying that I need to follow the chain of command. It was because he was not following the chain of command, and that's what I had instructed him to do. So when this came out, he was obviously ignoring a directive that I gave to him. So that's why we were going to have that conversation that Monday again. And the conversation that we had prior to this did involve HR. So HR was there in that conversation because it was me and the whole grants and planning department that had a counseling session. And that was prior to this action. So that is why he's told you, well, I need to check with my executive director and those types of things, because we had this conversation prior to this. So he was well aware of what he was doing and that we were gonna have that corrective action that next day. But no, he did not show up for that meeting.
Okay. And at least just to kind of outline, for the purposes of clarity, kind of the legislature's perspective, or at least my perspective within the legislature. And I don't want to speak for the entire legislature, but at least from my perspective within the legislative process. And this is the question, it's just, you know, articulating kind of during that discourse. My perspective is just that, you know, within the scope of these kind of touching base with all of these kind of different department heads about allocations, the budget. Like someone wants to advocate for themselves and say, this is the scope of kind of my responsibilities, and this makes, sense for an adjustment in terms of how outlay is made, because this is why, like, to me, that just sort of seems reasonable. It doesn't mean that those are going to be effectuated, because we obviously have a finite amount of resources to kind of contend with, but if someone wants to say, and make kind of that advocacy for themselves, it doesn't seem terribly problematic. So after that kind of email from you went out on that Friday, I actually clarified some of these points in a follow-up email in which I copied, I believe, you in the legislature, and just said, hey, this is what's happening. We had actually asked and solicited Mr. Pedro's kind of perspective on different issues in the scope as the grants and planning, interim grants and planning director, and we never replied to that. And so I believe that after that, Mr. Pedro copies most of us and states that he is raising complaints under or invoking his rights under Terra, I believe, and then additionally kind of raises whistleblower complaints in his account, at least before he's terminated, with the Office of the Interior, Dr. Miller, and then also the BIA as well. And so has any communication occurred in response to that? I'm not asking for specifics, I'm just asking, has there been any communication or response from the DOI, so the Department of Interior, Office of Inspector General, or the BIA in response to this complaint? So they've been in communication to the tribe?
No.
Okay. That's all the questions that I have, Speaker.
Thank you, Legislator DeLong. Yes.
Okay, next time, are there any more questions? With Mr. Claypool?
Question.
Yes, Legislator Sakel.
Earlier you spoke about the chain of command. You just, for clarification purposes, would you describe that chain of command?
So we have everybody has bosses, right? Right, chairman's my boss, vice chairman. And so then we have all the executive directors, so, and each of those, they run each division. So essentially with the chain of command, you have a boss, you report to that boss, and it's laid out by our org chart. So the org chart that we have is what we call the chain of command.
Yeah, I was just asking because, people kind of get confused about the chain of command or who they need to speak to with any of these problems or whatever situations they have. They probably sometimes don't know who they're supposed to go to.
Well, I know, when I came in, I think it's legislature, we said, I was here by myself, right? So I was the only executive director. So, yes, it was a bit daunting because you're one person. There was an easy line of the chain of command. Now that we have 4 divisions, it's a little bit convoluted. However, we're trying to get that out now. We do have those division people in place that are their bosses. And we want to make sure that that is conveyed to them, which is why we have monthly meetings with the directors. And we're trying to coordinate that with our new executive directors so that we can clarify that chain of command. But you're exactly right, sir. We bring in new personnel, we're a huge organization, right? We're a huge organization, and we do need to know who are those leaders with our chain of command. So we are getting that information.
Yes, Mr. Weaver.
So I would like to speak to that chain of command a little bit in reference to the budget process. Typically, what happens is the department director will make a court request. That request will come into finance. Will submit that information to the legislature, and then the legislature will then from there vet that. So if there's any additional changes or requests for additional funds or increase of anything, that first comes to the finance and let's say executive branch, and then that's submitted to the legislature, then the legislature will go back and say, let's call this department, let's talk to these people, let's see why they're requesting this. That's how it gets technically agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Can I just offer kind of a comment?
Yes, legislator Dumont.
Okay, I'm not disputing that that's how it's been organized in the past. I believe that finance personnel was actually kind of on that teleconference with Mr. Pedro in that specific instance, so there was at least awareness in that particular kind of context from the finance department. And just just as something that I guess encompasses both legislative state officials point and then an earlier kind of point from Mr. Toya. Mr. Toya, you mentioned that, Mr. Pedro had not been kind of in that discussion with you or kind of discussed that element. But at least from the sort of feedback that we received from Chairman Spotted Bird, especially kind of during the course of the hearing yesterday, he has stated that he wants the legislature to be the only contacting him essentially kind of in those discussions. And so if we're complying with that, then it would seem to be incumbent upon him to communicate with you to review him. Like if we're having a meeting with the grants and planning department, because he's saying repeatedly to us, and actually issued directives to, folks that you're not really involved with, but he's issued directives to the KCLA channel and the UGC channel to cease communication that doesn't take place. So if we are sort of trying to work with that particular perspective of that protocol, I feel like in this particular instance that was complied with because to my experience and recollection, the executive branch was aware of kind of our touch base with Mr. Pedro. The finance department was on that teleconference call. And so I think maybe there are nuances to work out there, but you can see, I hope from kind of like the vantage point of us that we telling us you are not to communicate with any people under our umbrella except for me, then that communication with the channel downstream and so just want to clarify and offer that kind of context and commentary in response to that points from legislative state particularly about kind of sometimes there's ambiguity in the chair's demand, your point, and then this would be a good point.
Thank you, legislator Dumont. Are there any more questions? From the legislators? If not. Then
I'll make a motion, we adjourn, we move on to the next part in our agenda, which is part C. The testimony given by Janine Colbert.
we have a motion,
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second to move on to the amended portion.
Do you want to excuse the?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask
Yeah.
if it'd be
Yes.
depart.
Thank you, both gentlemen, for appearing before the legislature.
Hey, thank you all for your courtesy. I really appreciate how this was handled. So, thumbs up.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, gentlemen. We have a motion and a second. Move on to the amended the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The abstentions? We'd like to welcome Genevieve Oldbeer.
Speaker, if I may, just before she comes up, for our visitors, we will get to the discussion here after we discuss next piece of business, so just hang out for a second. And then our discussion will not be online either, just want to let you know.
Yes. Legislative administrator. Can I help you? You keep her, he's with her,
I swear under penalty of perjury
I swear under penalty of perjury,
that all testimony I provide today shall be the truth,
testimony provided today shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and I shall not mislead
and I shall not mislead
or intentionally omit any material fact in response,
or shall not
omit
or intentionally
or any material fact
or any material fact
in response
in response
to any question I am asked.
to any question I am asked.
Thank you.
Just as a kind of bookkeeping note, audio, the way it's up, it's never. Priority. It was not picking up audio. So you might have to first. You wanna do a mic check real quick?
You can hear me? Mic check.
Thank you for joining us today. Gonna be over. Please, once again, please state your name for the record.
My name is Genevieve Oldberry.
Are you here voluntarily today? You can just press it once and it'll ring.
Yes, I am here voluntarily.
Has any legislator pressured you to answer questions before us today?
No,
Can you please summarize your work history with Kiowa Casinos for us by listing your job titles and approximate dates for each role?
I began working at the Kiowa Casino in Duval, March 5th, 2007 as a revenue audit manager. I stayed in that position until 2012, where I became the finance manager. And I was the finance manager there at Duval until mid-January 2018. And then I became the manager at the casino in Carnegie in around mid-2018 January until summer of 2019, around June, mid-June. And then I was brought back down to Kiowa Casino Duval at that time, again as a revenue audit manager from mid-June 2019 until I resigned in the summer of 2021, mid-July.
In your entire span of work for the casino, have you ever been responsible for verifying the validity of quorum or non-quorum fees for KCOA board members?
At no time was I ever responsible for validating any quorum, non-quorum, anything for the KCOA. I never signed off on any documents for KCOA.
When you were a general manager at Carnegie, you would have had no role in financial oversight of the KCOA, correct?
Yes, at the beginning of January 2018, they took those privileges away from me to be able to see certain financial aspects from the accounting program once I became the general manager at Carnegie.
On Wednesday, KCOA Chairman McMahon entered into evidence. Or
Was Tuesday.
Need a statement.
Okay, on Tuesday, KCOA Chairman Richard McMahon entered into evidence and opening statement. It reads in part, quote, during the May 2024 meeting, Genevieve Oldbeard, who served as the finance director at the casino during the period in question, was called to testify. She confirmed that during her tenure, she was tasked with verifying the validity of all KCOA quorum and non-quorum reimbursement requests and ensure that all supporting documentation was in order prior to any reimbursement being issued. During her employment, she never heard any concerns raised regarding how the KCOA was reimbursed until the letter of concern was submitted to the NIGC. Unquote. Is Mr. McMahon's characterization accurate?
It is not.
If not, how is it inaccurate?
I was never in my financial position there at Kiowa Casino and Ball as the finance manager. Somebody had sent me a screenshot of what he had posted on Facebook. And it said, as my position as finance director, whatever, what the description you just gave me, was in that email or that screenshot. I was never a finance director, I was a finance manager. And I was not given authority or access to financial records for the KCOA. All of those records were done by Gloria Mystic, who was my boss. She was the CFO. So my position, I was never privy to that information. They were kept under passcodes from the Excel folders. I couldn't access those because they were passcode protected. In our accounting system, I couldn't see anything that had to do with the KCOA. There were different levels that each job title was given, and my job title, I was never able to access anything KCOA. The only thing I was able to access that was KCOA were the bank cards that the KCOA carried on them, which they made purchases on, that we reconciled each month with our bank statements. Now, those are the things I see, and I had to contact them for receipts when they didn't give us the correct documentation to reconcile our bank accounts for those bank cards. And the CFO Gloria Mystic would print out those bank statements and email them to us so we could do those reconciliations. So we didn't have access to the actual bank information. She would email us the bank statement. And then we would match that part up to their bank cards and get the documentation for what they paid for on those bank cards. Never at one time have I ever seen any of the reimbursements or signed off on any of the reimbursements. Those are two separate things. The bank cards and the reimbursements are two separate parts of the finance. So it was not correct to what he said.
You're saying, thank you. It's all the questions that
Speaker, and then we dismiss the witness.
yes, thank you for your time.
Thank you for letting me clear that up.
Yes, there's only one more item on the agenda.
I motion we adjourn this hearing.
Motion by legislator Wilhelm to adjourn, seconded by legislator Single. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned.